than a minute before we get started. We'll see everybody else that's planning on joining gets into the call. If you're just logging on, hi, I'm Justin Charles, use he, him pronouns. I'm from New York City. I'm a member of the National Political Committee for DSA. Feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. And all right, we're at 5 after the hour. All right, so again, welcome to the Path to Green Social Housing, put on by DSA's Green New Deal Campaign Commission and the Housing Justice Commission. Again, my name is Justin Charles, I use he, him pronouns. I'm based in New York City, and I'm a member of DSA's National Political Committee. If you don't already know, DSA is the largest socialist organization in the United States of America. We do all sorts of work in a variety of capacities toward building a more democratic United States. My hope is that you're already a member of DSA, but assuming you're not, I'm going to plug the join link. So non-members, please join DSA, and after this call, we're gonna ask you again, and I think you probably will smash that join button if you didn't already. If you're already a member though, if you go to that same URL that Nafis just dropped into the chat, you'll have options to move to monthly dues if you're not already a monthly dues payer, or if you really, really want to level up, you could become a income-based dues payer, which is a little bit more of a commitment to the organization. I myself am a income-based dues payer. So if you want to be like me, I would smash that button. But just to set the table a little bit for what we're going to be talking tonight, we're going to be going over what green social housing is, talking about how we get there with folks from the Green New Deal Campaign Commission, as well as the Housing Justice Commission, talking about some work they're up to, and then a bit of an overview for what chapters work on this might look like, and some Q&A from y'all. So I'm going to hand it off to Jade to talk about green social housing. And again, if you're not a member, join. If you are a member, level up those dues. Nafis, you want to drop the link in the chat again, that'd be great. But I'm going to hand it off to Jade.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you, Justin. Thanks for the introduction. Yeah, my name's Jade. I use he, him pronouns. I'm in Omaha. I'm a tenant unionist here, and I'm also on the steering committee of the Housing Justice Commission. We're really excited to help put this together with our comrades in the Green New Deal Campaign Commission. Yeah, and I'm going to jump in with talking about, like, from the sort of perspective of tenant unionists and housing organizers, what it looks like, what sort of how we define green social housing, what the kind of parameters and principles we started to develop around them are, and give us basically just like some background to start off the broader conversation. Yeah, we've been working within the commission, especially our policy wing, on developing these things. So they come from DSA members having conversations with each other, working through what social housing has looked like in other instances across the globe, and figuring out what it might look like here. So we started then kind of with this simple, like, sort of utopian statement, right? Like, social housing is when people live where we want, with whom we want, and how we want. Thinking through, obviously, the limitations by available resources that we have. And sometimes, right, like, what we want is not necessarily what our neighbors want, right? So we have to work through democratic processes to come to, consensus and agreement. But I think even more than that, right, what this speaks to is that the development of social housing is a process, right? Like, it's not something that we're going to be able to pass a bill or run a campaign, right? It's something that we, to ultimately get there, we'll probably be struggling for, like, for the rest of our lives, obviously. But it also is a transformation of social relations. And that transformation starts with undoing the power that landlords have over our lives. Can we go to the next slide, please? Thank you. And I did animations here, but maybe just click through them real quick. So we came up, with 4 kind of tenants for these. Has to involve social housing has to involve redistribution for landowners. It needs to be sustainable and high quality. It needs to be run by the people that live there, right? We need democratic control of our housing. And we have to have universal access. Just thinking through things like disability, segregation, undoing that kind of, racist legacy of this country. Yeah, so I'm going to jump in a little bit, if you go to the next slide, into like what those kind of look like in practice. The first one of the points to think through. Oh, and if there's like questions on any of these points, if there's things like that, you can obviously use the chat, but we're going to be doing a question and answer at the end of the call after all the panelists have kind of gone through. And hopefully we'll have a chance to get to all those questions. I think the ones that don't get answered in this call, we can follow up with later. Yeah, so redistribution. For social housing to work, it has to meaningfully expropriate property from capitalists, right? It can't be through financial transactions because those just continue to leave the same amount of power that the capitalists and the landlords have in their hands, right? And the issue is the power that they hold, the fact that they can decide where we live and how we live and what we pay for that. We have to be able to undo that. And that means taking it away from them, not without, like fair, quote unquote, compensation. And that's going to require building quite a lot of tenant power, worker power. Yeah, it speaks to the overall social relation that we have to change. If we go to the next spot here. Cool. It also has to be sustainable and high quality. I think that's such a big reason that we're doing, this call with our comrades in the Green New Deal, right? Like we're, in a moment of ecological crisis. I won't delve into that as much because it's, not necessarily my expertise, but it's something that we have to consider when we're building new homes, if that's necessary, when we're retrofitting existing homes. And I think we also need to think of like a socialist land ethic, right? Like our development has to consider not just, building and people, but it has to consider our larger impacts on the land that around us and the world. If we go to the next one, please. Thank you. Cool. The third piece that we need to think through when we're putting this vision together is democratic control, right? Like our homes must be governed by tenants. Right now, tenants don't have a say, right? When we're doing like trainings with our ETOC program, which Sarah's going to talk about more in a little bit here, one of the things that people talk about is like how the little things that they're trying to do to get neighbors together just get stomped on by landlords sometimes, right? Like people want to hold a barbecue to improve the community there. And the landlord says like, oh, well, you can't use the lobby. That's not allowed. We have to undo that kind of authority that people have over our lives. And we need to figure out like how we can govern ourselves as part of that. We have to develop a collective will of tenants. And then if you go to the universal access, please. Thank you. Yeah, homes truly for all. So I think our line on this right is like housing must be available for everyone, free of segregation by income or race. Housing also must be accessible for people with very different needs. And we need to improve the housing standards to accommodate all disabilities and needs. Yeah, sorry. Okay, I've got to wrap my point up here. Yeah, right. There's existing laws around these nationally, right? Like there's especially in public housing to try to do these sort of things. But I think anyone who's spent any time doing tenant organizing and public housing can speak to how insufficient those things are. And I think especially as we're talking through like transitional development of social housing, of starting to move away from public housing as it exists right now in the United States, where it's largely income segregated. It's going to involve housing developments that bring people in of very mixed incomes. I think when we look at the success of programs like in Red Vienna, right, so much of it has been that everyone is involved in the success of social housing, regardless of how much money they make. Okay, so I think that does a pretty solid job, hopefully, of setting up the kind of basics of what green social housing is going to look like and what we'd like to build towards. And I think I'm going to pass back to Justin briefly before Johnny talks more about what the Green New Deal Campaign Commission is doing around this issue. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jade. Before we get any deeper into it, we wanted to know a little bit more about the people on this call. So we're going to do a little poll. asking you all to tell us whether or not you're a DSA member. So we're just going to have a couple minutes for people to fill out the poll, and then we'll get back into it. While I have your ear, talk a little bit about what makes DSA so great. So, one of the things that Jade talked about in the presentation about social housing was about democratic control. In the United States, in a lot of the capitalist world that we live in, most folks don't have any experience with democracy in any real substantive way. Most people don't have much control over a lot of their lives. And one of the things that we seek to do with DSA is to change that, is to make more of everybody's life democratic. And what a great way to practice that, but to be in a democratic organization, an organization that's member-led, where members come together to decide strategy, to figure out what is the best path toward building this democratic, free, just society, democratic socialist society that we all want. One of the ways that we do that is we're about to have our convention in a couple of weeks in Chicago, where we're going to get together and talk about what are we going to do for the next 2 years. It looks like the poll's done, and all right, most of you are members. That's good. We're going to do something about that 24% though before the end of this call. Hopefully going to get you all to join DSA. We've got the link in the chat. So please join DSA. We're going to keep asking you. I'm going to hand it back over to Johnny.
Great. Thanks, Justin. Hi, everyone. I'm Johnny. My pronouns are he, him. I'm a member of East Bay DSA, and I'm on the GNDCC. Basically, our job is to come up with and implement a political program. We're a national level body for the Green New Deal. We're a national level body, and we work mostly with chapters to develop campaigns under the umbrella of what we call Building for Power. Next slide. Next slide. So basically, Building for Power is a framework that is pretty broad and includes social housing. Basically, we're trying to get chapters to organize campaigns, and we're supporting them to improve, expand, create, and sustain, right? To really deepen the social state and public services, right? In 4 key areas. And I'll talk about those in a bit. But basically, we see these campaigns as having a couple of different goals, right? We want to rebuild the labor movement, help rebuild the labor movement in the United States, and rebuild the public sector, right? To actually, we believe that as democratic socialists, we need to have an actual social state that can act solidaristically and democratically. And we also, want to make sure that we actually make decarbonization happen in the US, right? That we actually act on climate change and the ecological crisis. Next slide. So before I talk a little bit more about what B4P is, I want to talk about why we chose this kind of framework, why we developed it, right? And so this requires us to sort of assess what's happening in the broader US and then what's also happening in DSA, right? It's important to consider the context, right? So what's happening in the US, right? Well, over the past 4 years, we used to have a minimal welfare state, right? We used to have things like, mental health services, a broader social safety net, social housing, even though, or more of it, even though it was, in my view, deeply flawed. But those things have been chipped away at by the last 40 years in neoliberalism, right? I think we're all familiar with this story. More recently, we've seen some very exciting developments. DSA has become a much larger and more powerful organization. Over the past couple of years, the labor movement in this country has been revised. We've seen the growth of workplace organizing and tenant organizing. But there are some, and also with the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, right, we've seen attempts by green capitalists to actually make a transition happen, right? And so there's currently lots of public spending and an effort by capitalists through the state to make a green transition happen, albeit on their terms, not that of workers or tenants. I would say also a critical challenge, for the working class right now is fragmentation and disorientation, right? As Green New Dealers, we've seen this firsthand, for example, with conflicts between environmental justice communities and the building trades, or between public transit workers and riders. Next slide. So within DSA, right, as I mentioned before, DSA has grown a lot, although very unevenly between chapters. And we do have now at some, in some cases, like, real power, at least on the local level. But just like there's fragmentation within the broader working class, there's fragmentation within DSA. There's especially between different modes of organizing, right? There is a need to cohere these modes, we think, by establishing a common strategic and ideological basis in how these different kinds of modes of organizing relate to one another, rather than necessarily to compete with one another. Okay, next slide. So Building for Power attempts to address these issues, right? Building for Power campaigns aim to unite disparate sections of the working class, right? We have 4 key sort of sections in mind. Public sector workers, right? Like teachers, transit riders, utility workers, people who work in social housing, construction workers, people who build public services, right? Like social housing, public service users. So we can think of like people who ride the bus, people who live in social housing, people who, consume electricity, and environmental justice communities that are most impacted by the environmental effects of these services, right? So we have these 4 different like constituencies in mind. We're trying to get them to work together, right? To unite them behind demands to dramatically expand green public services, right? These demands would be deeply, widely felt and targeted at the local level, right? So I think perhaps most importantly, they would strengthen the power of the working class by facilitating new labor and tenant organizing, and by organizing to win the demand and the effects of winning the demand itself, right? So we want to build out these green public services, but then attach in the process, use this to build the labor movement. Next slide. Right. So I already covered a lot of this, right? But I think what's really important is that to understand is the connection between improving the public service for everyone and improving the workplace conditions and organizing capabilities of workers, right? We want, these 2 groups are pitted against each other. Like I said, we want them to work together. I think also in the case of social housing specifically, right, we want to be able to connect tenant and workplace struggles, right? I'm a labor organizer. We talk a lot about whole worker organizing. And I think this is an example of it, right? Social housing is a demand that unifies people in their capacity as tenants and as workers. Next slide. Right. So I think I already kind of addressed some of these issues, but I think one of the important things to understand is that a lot of money is currently flowing down from the federal government to the state and local, right, through legislation like the BIF and the IRA. And this is, creating new politics around the implementation of these pieces of legislation, right? And we argue that there are critical points of intervention for DSA, especially if we can work in coalition with labor unions, with tenant unions, with environmental justice communities. Okay, next slide. So like I said, there are these 4 strategic areas of work. we're looking more specifically at green social housing on this call. Next slide. So some example demands we have that would sort of be considered B4P demands that would rebuild the public sector and the labor movement would be to establish and fund, right, a local public social housing developer and do build outs with strong labor and environmental standards, right, to make sure the construction is done using union labor, that workers are able to organize, and then also that the housing is green. Next slide. Or I should mention where housing developers already exist, significantly improve them and expand them. So winning green social housing, right? I think a couple of caveats, right? Number one, tenant power is really important to green social housing fights in particular. We see, you know, often in many cases, the development of tenant power and tenant organizing is an important prerequisite, right, for doing a social housing campaign. And some chapters aren't ready for that, right? We need to, in some cases, chapters will need to build capacity and organizing experience and develop deepen ties with the already organized space in these different kind of constituencies. One case study that we've been looking at, which is interesting, is Seattle DSA, which recently sort of led the major field operation in the victory behind I-135, which established a social housing developer. There are definitely, you know, things that, you know, things to improve on, right? I think this campaign itself didn't involve tenant organizing as directly, and also there's a question of whether this social housing developer is actually going to be funded, and DSA's own place within the coalition. Nevertheless, we think that examples like this can serve as like a useful a guide for sort of more like legislative and ballot and campaigns going forward. Thank you. And with that, I'll pass it to Sarah M. from AHGC.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Hey, everyone. I'm Sarah. I use she, her pronouns. I am on the HJC steering committee, and I am in River Valley DSA, which is in the western part of Massachusetts. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the work that we have done, excuse me, on the HJC to really try to build some of that tenant power that, yeah, so HJC Housing Justice Commission is what that stands for. Thanks for the clarifying question. So we're going to talk a little bit about how we are building tenant power through particularly building up tenant organizing efforts. And thank you, Johnny, for mentioning that as a really important piece of that. So next slide, please. Awesome. So when we get to green social housing to build by building tenant power, what we mean is really looking at building up the capacity of tenants to organize. So if we could go to the next slide, I'm going to talk just for a second, hopefully not get too deep into the weeds, but we often talk about tenants unions as the way that we might start building up that tenant power. And this is where a lot of our work on the Housing Justice Commission has lived in the last year or so. And a tenant union may not be as familiar to you as a labor union, but they have a lot of commonalities. So basically, when we talk about tenants unions, we're talking about tenants in a building or in a city coming together to exercise their collective power. And there's some really successful examples of tenants unions. I was a founding member of the Greater Boston Tenants Union, which is the picture on the left. That was a protest that we did a couple of years ago, which was a lot of fun. We yelled at a very wealthy art collector down by the Institute of Contemporary Art. And on the right, that is a picture of some tenants in Tank, Tenant and Neighborhood Council, which is in the Bay Area. LATU, also a very, very cool, important tenant union. They have something like 5,000 members, which is incredible. So we have these tenants unions forming around the country. There's really been a sort of resurgence, I think, in tenant organizing for a lot of reasons. Rent is really high, in case you missed that over the last couple of years. But when we talk about tenants unions, we're talking about that kind of landlord-tenant contradiction, if you want to use that term, or that site of struggle. So, we're not looking at the workplace like you might be in a labor union, but a tenant, a union at home. We often say, you need a union at work, you need a union at home. So that's our kind of catchphrase that we throw around sometimes. Next slide, please. Cool. So a big question that we get sometimes is, why build tenant unions? And there are a few different reasons. It might be to address issues like rent hikes. That's a really, really big issue. Habitability. So the actual, ability of somebody to live comfortably in their home. The walls aren't caving in, the floors aren't caving in, you have heat. You might be getting harassment from your landlord. You might be facing eviction. These are some of the really common issues that we see. We also talk about tenants unions as a place where we can start to politicize people in their everyday lives, or to kind of politicize the everyday, to take collective action together and to really come together to fight together, and to not think of politics as something that you just do, once every 2 or 4 years at the ballot box, right? It's something a lot bigger than that. And I think that's a really core tenet of DSA as well. And then finally, we want to create a politicized fighting base that can defend any gains that we get, any reforms that we're able to get from, the capitalist class. And we think that that's really, really, really important. I did also just want to note, because there have been a couple questions coming in around public versus social housing. So we can talk more about this in the Q&A section, but I do want to just mention that tenants unions are really important in public housing as well. I think if you've never experienced public housing, tenants of public housing face a lot of these same issues. Public housing is often in really poor conditions. There might be harassment. You still have a landlord in public housing, it's just the state. So you can still face some of these same issues. And we've seen public housing tenants come together and fight along these same lines as well. So that's one reason that we think that social housing really has to have that component of democratic control, because otherwise you're just creating another, it's great that housing can be more affordable. That's obviously a really, really important thing. But it's that democratic control that is really important as well. And I just wanted to point out this example to the right. This was a tenants union in Houston, Texas, which is not always a place that we think of as being particularly friendly to this type of organizing, right? They won after going on a rent strike for 2 months, and they went on a rent strike because they lost power for 21 days after the winter storms there a couple years ago. So, we can see there you've got this coming together of eco-socialist ideas, Green New Deal, and living conditions. So I was like, oh yeah, gotta point out that example. Next slide, please. So really quick, I just want to talk a little bit about how we have been trying to work on some of these issues in the HJC. We've started a program called the Emergency Tenant Organizing Committee, or ETOC. We were big fans of EWOC, which is the Emergency Workers Organizing Committee that our fabulous comrades over in labor are working on. And we thought there were a lot of really cool ideas, and hey, let's let's creatively borrow and do something along the same lines for tenants as well. So starting in May of last year, we started this training and mentorship program for DSA members, also for their comrades. So far, we've held 6 weekend trainings. We've done about 20-ish chapter presentations, and we've got around 17 tenant unions that are in formation or in that that kind of mentorship stage. And if we go to the next slide, I will just talk really briefly about what these phases look like, and then pass it over to our comrades on the GNDCC. So ETOC has 3 phases. We have an intake phase, and that's basically where we come to your chapter or your working group or your comrades that you've gathered, and we give a presentation, we talk to you about what the program looks like, learn a little bit more about your, what's going on in your area. Then we have a weekend training. Like I said, we've done about 6 of those so far. And then we have a kind of prolonged mentorship period. So after your group has gone through the training, we offer a mentor to you to work kind of one-on-one to, make sure that you have someone to talk to, that you are able to work through some of those kind of common issues. So that is what ETOC looks like. I know folks have been dropping links in the chat if you want to learn more, if you want to join, but we are happy to take questions about that as well at the end. And I'm going to pass it over to Jeff, who's going to talk more about what a green social housing campaign looks like in the GNDCC.
Great. Thanks, Sarah. Hey, everybody. My name's Jeff, he, him pronouns. I'm in Austin DSA, and I'm a member of GNDCC steering and one of the leads for the training and coaching team. So coaching and training and coaching is where really the rubber meets the road in the campaign. It's where we are in touch with chapter leads to walk them through the steps of building a campaign and executing it. It's basically direct one-on-one relationship building as well as skill sharing. So this is where you as a member would work directly with us one-on-one, and that starts with our training program. So that brings members into a series of trainings, primarily concerned with basic strategy planning from a chapter's point of view, taking into account all those things Johnny talked about, the terrain, the situation in the chapter, and then as well as internal organizing skills. So the main training we try to start folks off on is a strategic campaign training, group training, bunch of chapters, talk through the steps of how to research and form a good demand, how to build chapter buy-in, how to develop coalitions and constituencies, et cetera, all the way through to hopefully winning your campaign in one of those areas Johnny talked about. Yeah, there we are. I should have said slide, but it's pretty simple. In addition to internal organizing training, well, I want to say that our DSA staff, field organizers, are really great resources for chapter members to get certain internal organizing skills and tools. So we work with them very closely. Caitlin's on this call, who is one of those folks. And we're also developing more advanced trainings, teaching chapters how to work with labor unions, how to do an inside legislative campaigns. We have a wonderful written guide already on how chapters can work with labor unions in general, the kinds of issues they come up against. And all this group training then feeds into coaching. This is where we have the one-on-one mentorship with the leaders of, thank you for the slide, with the chapter members, the leaders of the chapter. This is where something like skill sharing meets relationship building and connecting people throughout DSA. So we assign a coach to a campaigning chapter. A coach is just an experienced Green New Deal organizer who we train and recruit. The coach will then be in contact with chapter leads and members and work with them on a week-to-week, month-to-month basis, directly on how to run a campaign. And the main focus of the coach is to assess the chapter situation and to channel them to the right trainings, channel them to the right meetings, and the right written resources. And at the end of the day, however, really one of the best things we're doing, I think, that is relationship building is the campaign huddles. These are big monthly meetings we have with all of our coaches, all of our chapter members, leads who are involved in the campaign, our staff folks and steering, and we get together and we talk through chapter campaigns, where folks are, what they're running up against, the skill sharing, the relationship building between chapters there and between members is something we don't see enough in DSA, and I'm very excited about it. I think it's a really good way to build relationships in DSA and really push towards building successful campaigns that can win green social housing for us. So if you want to hear more, get in touch. I think we dropped the link there, or will, and I am going to pass it to Allison.
Thanks, Jeff. Hey everyone, I'm Allison, she, her, calling in from Boston DSA. Thanks everybody for joining us tonight. I have the very good fortune to be working with another mentor from the Emergency Tenant Organizing Committee from San Diego. And we together are helping one of the 17 tenant unions in formation in the Twin Cities to continue moving forward and adding buildings as they start putting together the city's first, to my knowledge, autonomous tenant union. Kind of the first steps after you as an organizer meet with the mentor, or you're going to be talking about what issues you're facing in your building or what issues are going on in the city that you think might be a good hook so that you can start talking to your neighbors. And that is the first real challenge within this mentorship structure. The goal is to meet as many people as possible and have conversations that can hopefully erupt into some collective organizing. Along the way, there are lots of opportunities to address how housing precarity comes into all of our lives. Organizing can be a risk. And as a mentor, we definitely talk about how to mitigate any harm that might arise because you have made this decision to start getting to know people in your neighborhood and figuring out what to do in the face of rising rent and terrible conditions and all the other problems that, seem to suffocate us in this fight. In these weekly sessions that I have had with my mentees, they're not always weekly, by the way. Another big organizing challenge, of course, is trying to coordinate schedules across 3 time zones. But one approach that we've taken is to bring in other organizers to talk about new situations as they come up. So phoning a friend, and we've experimented with different ways of pairing mentors and organizers according to geographic location, or trying to introduce folks who are maybe organizing in very diverse settings to try to get increased experience. So I grew up in Missouri. My closest neighbor at our first house was about 45 minutes away. Now I live in the 19th most dense place in the United States. Conditions, of course, are different for that reason. And the kind of support that we offer as mentors, strategically, we can provide advice about how to have hard conversations. So, if someone in your building is very distressed because their packages are continually being stolen, and maybe that is causing some discord in the community. We talk about how to bring curiosity to that kind of conflict. And then also strategic advice about what if the landlord shows up to your barbecue, or what if nobody at all shows up to your barbecue where you're meant to get to know your neighbors. We try to incorporate different resources that we've picked up as mentors along the way, literature, readings, both contemporary and historical, and also we do put together some structured pieces of feedback for folks if they ask them. I think the most important question that comes up in this work is, what do you want to have happen next? So as a mentor, I'm not there in the building, and it's important not to make assumptions that you know exactly what the person with whom you're speaking wants to see change about their living conditions. As Jade mentioned at the very beginning of this hour, we're building autonomous tenant unions, not to pass a bill. We're doing it so that there won't be landlords anymore. If every single person here hits the link to apply for ETOC, the Emergency Tenant Organizing Committee, if everybody goes and does that, that would be great. But even if each and every tenant in this country were organized, it would mean that there was still such a thing as tenants. And I'm on this call right now because I think that it is impossible and impractical to assume that tenancy can continue and that our planet will survive that. So the most practical step we can take to address the climate crisis is to break this feudal relationship that is really destroying us. Justin, back over to you.
All right. Thank you, Allison. Thank you, everybody else, for your presentations. Just going to give one more plug, not one more, I'll give another one, but right now, I'll do a plug for all of you who are not members, hopefully fewer than the 24% that answered the poll earlier saying you weren't members, to please join DSA. Somebody wants to drop a link in the chat, I would appreciate it. But we're gonna go to some of the questions that you all asked in the Q&A box. The first question is, how specifically can tenant unions help us get social housing? What would a campaign for green social housing led by tenants look like? I'm gonna let Sarah kick us off with this question.
Yeah, so this is a really, really, really great question. And I will try to answer as best I can, but definitely would love anyone else who wants to jump in and make my answer better to help. So I think there are a few different ways that we could conceptualize a kind of tenant-led green social housing movement. You know, green social housing, it can be, of course, building new social housing. I think that's that's really exciting. People talk about a public developer. There's a lot of stuff that feels, really exciting about that. There are also social housing proposals that involve retrofitting existing housing with, not only to make it that kind of mixed income, but to make it ecologically friendly. So I think it's definitely really feasible to imagine a group of tenants or a group of public housing tenants, say, putting pressure on their landlord to retrofit. I think that would be a really incredibly concrete example that I can think of in terms of, getting to that green piece. In terms of, what a kind of tenant-led green social housing movement might look like on a larger scale, we talked about this a little bit, but I really feel very strongly that, we can put forward the best bills in the world, and we can put forward the best ideas, and they can even pass, that's always super exciting, right? We love cheering on when good things pass. But we know that the instant that we pass something, it's going to be under attack. It's going to be, people are going to want to gut it. People are going to want to tear it down. They're going to want to make it weaker. We can see this with, just about any kind of reform that we put forward. people will want to try to find a way to not make it happen, or to undermine it the best that they can. And yeah, they'll try to preempt it. So I think that, you can imagine a fighting group of organized tenants saying, no, nope, not on my watch, and putting the pressure on that is needed to really make sure that any type of reform sticks. Because otherwise it's just incredibly easy for it to evaporate. And I don't know if any of my other comrades in the call want to add anything or think of other examples of what that kind of campaign might look like.
Yeah, really quickly, I think I just add that, like, without that organized force, what we get is compromise, right? And we don't get everything that we need to be able to, carry out this vision. It gets to be, we get back to the sort of public housing situation we have right now, right, where it's got issues. And I don't think anyone here on the call is against public housing. I've seen a few questions on those kind of lines. I think what we're pointing out is that it's insufficient, and for it to be sufficient, it needs to involve some decisions, right? Like, we need to have mixed incomes. We need to have tenants that are invested in like high quality buildings that they've helped build the power to like put into place.
All right, unless you want to add anything, Allison, we can move on to the next question. Nope. All right. Thanks, y'all. Next question. Could you talk more about the opportunities with the BIF/IRA? Unpack more of the details for local/regional fights and potential outcomes.
Great. Yeah, I can take that. So I think that of the four sort of areas that B4P is, helping chapters develop campaigns around, housing is probably the theme that has like the least available like money coming down the pipeline. So I think my answer might be a little bit less relevant. I mean, there are like a lot of different models for municipal finance. I think the Center for Public Enterprises is like a great resource to like look into that and like, look to, there are some reports that like look at like the history of how these things have been funded and the pros and cons. I'm certainly not an expert in it by any means. I think one sort of interesting angle. So the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, has provisions for like weatherization and like green retrofits, right? And the IRA also has like a direct pay, what's called a direct pay mechanism, which like basically means that like tax credits that were only previously available to like very specific groups of people, like private capitalists, like in the case of renewable energy, are now available to like public and nonprofit entities. And so I think that that's like kind of like there's like two angles there. One is potentially trying to see if this money could be used by social or public housing developers rather than private landlords. I think also another angle, and I'm not an expert enough to know whether that's a possibility, but I'm pretty sure it is. I also know that like a lot of the tax credits are allocated to like individual like homeowners or like people who own rental properties on a smaller scale. And I think that like that's like also probably a good like more immediate organizing opportunity, especially for tenants to try to get their landowners to, or their landlords to implement some of these changes. So yeah, I would say that those are two more like specific housing ideas. In terms of how they're going to play out across the country, I don't have a great sense on the housing front. I know that it's like part of the conversation when it's coming to like the development of this Seattle public housing developer, right? They set up this new commission and there are all these questions around its funding, including about how that relates to the IRA. I would say in other cases, like in transit, the biggest fights are about like whether you use this money to like build out public transit versus like highways. And that's playing out in like a bunch of different cities around the country, including where I live in the Bay Area. Similar stories with like the developed campaigns for public power. And I also think, of course, the labor question is like omnipresent, right? Like it, you know, no matter what you're building out, the question of like, what are the local labor laws and regulations, and how does that help affect or, you know, support workers or organizing? I think it's like also really important and salient question for a lot of these big projects. So anyway, I hope that sufficiently answers your question, but I can say more too. I'll provide my email in the chat.
Thanks, Johnny. Next question. I think we're only going to do maybe one or two more. But are there tenant unions who are running campaigns for social housing, and where? I don't know if any of the housing folks want to take this one.
Ask for clarification. So the question is, are there tenant unions that are activated around efforts to increase social housing? Is that the question?
Yeah.
Not in Massachusetts that I know of.
I can jump in here. Shanti, who is joining us, I see her name in the chat, is super involved in this and is about to release a national report on this very question. So we will be on the lookout for that. I do know that there have been various tenant advocacy groups, and I believe some tenants unions as well involved in some of the efforts in places like Seattle. But I'm not sure the extent to which that has totally become an integrated effort yet. I think it is a really exciting idea, and that's part of why we are doing this call, because we think there are going to be some incredible opportunities there, and very glad to hear that you are writing the intro for that right now. We really look forward to that.
All right, thank you, Sarah. I'm going to wrap up the Q&A on this question. Hang on a second. All right. So question. I agree that tenant organizing is critical to winning social housing and defending our gains, but we can't wait until the tenant-landlord relationship is abolished to create desperately needed social housing and to decarbonize housing stock. So why shouldn't the tenant organizing work be explicitly connected with coalitions fighting for legislation at the state level to build social housing development authorities? Who wants to take that one on?
Yeah, I think it should be. I think part of the reason that our answer in the previous question was sort of limited is because there aren't a lot of those campaigns going on right now. To my knowledge, the ones that have been involved, have had tenant unions involved. I think the Seattle campaign had some involvement from tenant unionists. I believe that the public developer bills that have been trialed in other states were supported pretty much universally by tenant unionists. I think the question, like, and maybe to, I don't know, get into a little bit here where there's maybe some differences, like what do those activities look like, right? And like, I mean, so much of the campaigns right now around like passing legislation, like offering testimony, right, or showing up and doing all those sorts of things. I think those are just one days of activities in the larger picture of building the tenant union. I think that we can do two things at once. And I think that wherever tenant unions are like encountering these campaigns, they should be, I think, critical of them and push them to be maximal programs, but they should engage with them.
Anybody from GNDCC want to add their little perspective on this one as well?
I mean, I'm happy to. I agree with what Jay just said, and I think that yeah, I mean, ultimately, coalition structure and tactics are really important. I also think, you know, in terms of, you know, what's DSA's place. I mean, I think this is like a huge issue in the Seattle campaign, right? Is that like DSA didn't have very much formal decision-making power, yet DSA was providing the field operation for most of the field operation for the campaign, right? And so how do you, you know, I think it, you know, in the GNDCC, we do think that coalitional work is really important, right? Like we do think that, for example, the work that DSA has done to build or work with, you know, labor unions and environmental groups to pass the Building Public Renewables Act, albeit obviously that campaign had its own limitations as well, and also working with the LA, right, teachers union, UTLA, to win like huge gains, including electrification in their most recent contract, right? These are really important efforts, right? And so, you know, whether we're like organizing as tenant unions or as part of a labor union, as part of DSA, like we can't think of ourselves as sort of like the only vehicle. Like coalitions are important, but like on what terms do you form those coalitions? And I think that this is something that we're really trying to get chapter leaders to think about when like very early on in the planning stage when it comes for B4P. I also think that like obviously you need like a really politicized, to, you know, the points that were made earlier, you need a really politicized base in order to get people to like show up for and commit to things like legislative activity. And so that's why like in many ways like tenant organizing is like a really important prerequisite. So yeah.
All right, thank you, Johnny, and thank everybody else for your answers, incisive answers to these questions. Sorry to folks if we didn't get to your question. That's our call. But before we go, I'm going to ask you yet again, if you haven't already, chipped away at that 24% from the poll earlier, to join DSA. There's a link in the chat. So if you're not a member, go there. If you are a member, go there too, because you can do a couple of things. You can change your dues to monthly dues, which is important, you know, offers a continuous revenue stream for the organization. Or you can level up even higher and go to the income-based dues, which is, you know, making a commitment to X percentage of your income going to DSA on a monthly basis. But that's our call. Thank you so much to our panelists. Thank you so much to the Housing Justice Commission, to the Green New Deal Campaign Commission. This is good stuff. Let's build green social housing. Let's get rid of landlords for good. Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.